Hi everyone, we're going to go through a few things that will be useful for you to know about how to tackle your Cambridge IGCSE English Paper 1. Okay, this is what the front of the question paper will look like. You can see that you've got 2 hours. Remember, some of you are entitled to extra time, but this is what you'll be confronted with on your exam desk. You'll also have an insert booklet with the 3 unseen texts in it, so text A, B and C. And you start off by answering about text A, and then B, and then C in the different sections of the exam. Okay, so for text A then, you'll start off by having a few questions worth very few marks, just 1 or 2 marks. And this is just an extract from text A on one of the papers. Let's have a look through it first of all. Let's just have a look at the things that you're going to be asked for in the questions first. So you can see they're what questions. They're quite straightforward questions where they're just asking you to pick out detail and pick out information. So it says, give 2 examples of types of endurance events other than ultramarathons according to the text. And then using your own words, explain what the text means by challenge the limits on line 3. Again, using your own words, what does the text mean by mythical beast on line 4? And then it says reread paragraph 3. And it says identify 2 ways in which Tough Mudder always differs from other extreme events. So let's have a look. Let's read this section of text A then. I'm not sure when endurance events like triathlons, adventure races and ultra-marathon running races through jungle, desert and mountainous terrain started to become popular, but they are here to stay and continue to challenge the limits of every competitor. Not so long ago, a marathon runner was a mythical beast. We all knew someone who had run a 42-kilometer marathon, but most of us had only actually seen them on TV. Now, everyone knows a marathon runner and they just look like normal people. Somewhere along the way, marathons became commonplace and a whole new breed of extreme activities arrived. The Ironman triathlon, crazy ultra marathons and adventure races that defy description, like the Tough Mudder. While a lot of extreme challenges are to do with ultra endurance, the Tough Mudder is short but involves getting hurt, sometimes by electric shocks and fire. Why would you? Okay, so let's have a look back at these questions. It says, give 2 examples of types of endurance events other than ultra marathons, according to the text. So if you have a look at it, you can see that, let's have a look at that first paragraph. You're looking for types of endurance events, doesn't it? It says triathlons, doesn't it? Adventure races, and ultra marathon races. So they want 2 examples other than ultra marathons. So I would put down triathlons and adventure races. Okay, and that should get us 1 mark. For the second question, it says using your own words. Now, in this Cambridge paper, whenever it says using your own words, they mean it. Okay, if you don't use your own words, if you just try and copy a word that was from the text, okay, you're not going to get any marks for it. You've got to make sure you use your own words when it says that. It's so tempting not to, but you've got to make sure, because what they want to see is that you've understood it and you're able to phrase it in a way that shows that understanding. So here, for these couple of questions here, they're just going to give you a word or a phrase from the passage and they just want to see that you've understood it. So on line 3, it says this phrase, challenge the limits. So we've got started to become popular, but they are here to stay and continue to challenge the limits of every competitor. Challenge the limits of every competitor. So what does that challenge the limits mean? It's to do with stretching the boundaries, stretching the extent of what they're capable of, pushing them to extremes. It's that kind of idea, isn't it? So they want to see that you've tried to have a go at pushing, expressing that in your own way, and then you should get a couple of marks for that. And then the next one, we've got mythical beast on line 4. Let's have a look at that one. Always look back at the text and see how it's used, because it's within the context of the passage that they're going to be asking you about it. So it says, not long ago, a marathon runner was a mythical beast. What does that mean? A marathon runner was a mythical beast. Well, think what a myth is. A myth is something that you kind of you don't think it's this, it's not necessarily true. It's kind of like a sort of legend, or kind of like sort of something almost sort of fantastical, not real. Okay, so a mythical beast here would be someone that you maybe weren't sure even existed because you hadn't really met them. Okay, someone unreal, someone a being or a person that you might admire or be in awe of, because you might kind of think, is that really possible? Is someone really capable of doing something like that? So mythical beast here almost means like an imaginary being, almost like a fantastical creature, almost like a made-up person. It's that kind of idea, isn't it? Because you can't believe that someone would be capable of something like that. That's the idea, isn't it? Okay, then let's have a look at paragraph 3. It says, reread it. Let's reread it. It says, somewhere along the way, marathons became commonplace and a whole new breed of extreme activities arrived. The Ironman triathlon, crazy ultramarathons, and adventure races that defy description, like the Tough Mudder. While a lot of extreme challenges are to do with ultra endurance, the Tough Mudder is short, but involves getting hurt, sometimes by electric shocks and fire. Why would you? And then it says, identify 2 ways in which Tough Mudder always differs from other extreme events. Okay, so let's have a look. I'm looking at lines 10 to 12 here. It says, while a lot of extreme challenges are to do with ultra endurance, the Tough Mudder is short, but involves getting hurt. Okay, so I would be picking out the idea of it being short, but it involves getting hurt, sometimes by electric shocks and fire. So I'm thinking short, getting hurt, electric shocks, fire. And I'd be tempted to squeeze 3 or 4 of those things onto a couple of lines. I know there's only 2 marks there, but I would just squeeze them next to those bullet points, just in case there's one of those they didn't like. Do you see what I mean? Always try and squeeze an extra little bit in there if you can, because if for some reason they don't like one of your points, if you've got something else there that's correct, they're likely to still give you the marks for it. Okay, let's have a look now. This is the mark scheme. So we wanted, for the first one, we wanted 2 correct responses. So we would have got a mark for triathlon and for adventure races, wouldn't we? Okay, or for Ironman or Tough Mudder. Okay, we could have said that as well. Okay, but they're the 2 things that would have got us the mark there. Let's have a look at the next question. We needed to explain what challenge the limits were. We were talking about pushing ourselves to the extreme, weren't we? You can see there this idea of testing yourself or pushing yourself, forcing or proving something to yourself, and then something about extremes or what's possible or the boundaries. We used that word, didn't we? Okay, they're the 2 things that you're going to get the marks for. Something about testing and pushing and forcing and proving, and then something about extremes or boundaries or beyond what's, establishing what's possible, what you thought was possible. Okay, the next one, again, is one where you've got to use your own words. So can you see, if you'd used the word challenge in that previous question, you wouldn't get the mark. Okay, you've got to think of another way of saying challenge and another way of talking about the limits, and then you get the marks, yeah? So it's actually quite straightforward. It's just, you might have to sit there for like a minute or so thinking, oh, I can't think of another way of saying that. And it's frustrating because you want to say it, you know what it means, but you want to say it in exactly the way that they've said it. But that's the point. You can't. You've got to find another way. So you might need to sit there for a minute or 2 thinking, oh yeah, I could put it that way. Okay. So if we look at the next one, it's to do with this mythical beast one. And we said something like imaginary creature, didn't we? And that would have got us the 2 marks. Look, imaginary, fictitious, not real, of legends, legendary. We were saying that, weren't we? And then something about creature, animal, monster, something like that instead of beast is what we were after. Okay, and then for this final one, we wanted something about it being short, would have got us a mark, and then something about getting hurt or the danger, the fire, the electric shock. Okay, So not just can you see that they're sometimes a bit picky in the mark schemes here? Can you see at the bottom it says do not credit dangerous? So it's got to be something to do with it being more dangerous than the other extreme events, the other ultra endurance events. Just the idea that it's dangerous is not good enough. And that's where if you just squeeze the extra word or phrase there that you were thinking about, it might just cover you, because you might have just said dangerous, and they might have thought, the examiner might be thinking, oh, I can't give a mark for that. Whereas if you say dangerous because there's often fire or electric shocks, then you definitely would. So it's kind of squeezing that extra little bit of detail in sometimes can get you that extra mark. Okay. Right, these are the next couple of questions. It says reread paragraphs 4 and 5. I put them there for you. And it says give 2 reasons why the writer decided to drop their habitual laziness and take up running, and explain why extreme sports are growing in popularity according to the text. And then reread paragraph 6. It says using your own words, explain why some Ironman competitors might still like to compete in ultramarathons. I'm not going to go through this, but you can have a go at that if you want to, and see how you've done on that. Okay, here's the mark scheme for those questions. So you can have a look through and see whether you've got the full marks for that question. Right. The next question is really important because this is the first longer question, and you can see that there are 15 marks for this. This will be based on text B, so it's a new text, all right? And this is the summary question. What they're asking you to do is to read this text and to pick out the main points. And you're not allowed to use notes, okay? This has got to be in continuous writing, so they want a paragraph or 2, okay, in full sentences. And you've got to use your own words as possible. So they want you to read this text B, okay, and they want you to pick out the main points, but they'll give you a focus. They will narrow it down a bit for you. Look at what it says. It says, according to text B, why did Jaden D want to take part in this particular event? Okay, so that you've got to be focused on that. Why did he want to take part in this event? You've got to limit yourself to 120 words. And what they're looking for is at least 10 points that you can pick out. Ideally, there might be 12 or 13 even in the mark scheme. Okay, try and be thorough and try to pick out as many points as you can to do with why he wanted to take part in the event here. You've got to be concise though, because you'll notice in the question it says your summary should not be more than 120 words. If you go a little bit over, you're not going to be penalised for it. And by that, I mean, yeah, you can go 10 words over, 15 maybe. The moment you go more than that, though, you're running the risk of losing a mark or 2. So you've got to try and keep it to 120 words. That's not easy, because if you think about it, if you're trying to make 10 points, that's like 12 words a point, isn't it? So you've got to try and be really concise. You can't be waffling here. Got to use your own words. Now, obviously, you're going to use the words tough mudder, aren't you? You know, you might use the words running. You know, you might use, there are key words that you're allowed to use, otherwise it would just be silly, wouldn't it? But what they don't want to see you do is just lift whole sentences you definitely don't quote, okay? So you can't quote, you can't lift whole sentences and phrases, because that, again, what they want to see is that you've read it, you've understood it, and then you can express it in your own way, clearly, okay? Keep an eye on spelling, punctuation, and grammar, because again, you could lose the odd mark for this here. And as I say, focus on the question because it will narrow down what you're looking for. So remember, the question is, why did Jaden D want to take part in this particular event? Here's the passage. You can read that through. Just pause it for yourself. Have a read through and think, right, I'm going to find 10 or 12 points from here about why he wanted to take part in the event. You can take that page and print it off if you want. Okay, have a go at it, see if you can pick them out, highlight them, okay, and see how many you've got. At the first reading, you might only find maybe 6 or 7. There will be at least 10 there, believe me. So if you only find 6 or 7 points, go back and do it again and highlight them again. Count to make sure you've got 10 or 12 points. okay? And then once you've highlighted them, all right, what you then need to start doing is like thinking, okay, I'm going to put them into my own words. Now, one way of doing that is maybe underneath or on a separate sheet of paper or whatever on the left. What you can do is then think, right, I've highlighted my 10 or 12 points. Now I'm going to jot them down really briefly, just in note form in my own words, okay? Then what you can do is take those 10 to 12 points that you've got there and think, can I group them together? So are there some points that are similar because they're about the same kind of thing? And you might think, oh, okay, these ones go together, and number them number 1 or something. And then you might think, oh, these 2 or 3 go together, number them number 2. Okay, and then you might have another 3 or 4 left that go together, number them number 3. And what you could do is then write them in, if you like, 3 little paragraphs, okay, or deal with them in that order. Because what that shows is that you've really structured and organized your points. You've not just picked them out, you've not just put them into your own words, but you've structured and organized them into a logical order by grouping them together. So if you've got time to do that, that's the best way of doing it. Okay, here is the mark scheme then. You can see on the top left here, you've got the 12 points that were on the mark scheme. I'm hoping that they were the kind of things that you highlighted as you were going through, that you would have picked out. Okay, and then that's how thoroughly you pick those out and group them together will depend whether you get 10 marks out of 10 for that. Okay, the other 5 marks are for how well you organize your response and for your spelling, punctuation and grammar, and making sure that you're definitely using it in your own words. So I've put that other part of the mark scheme in the bottom right hand corner there. But to be honest, the main thing that you need to focus on is being really thorough, making sure that you've definitely picked out 10 or 12 points and that you're definitely writing it in your own words, and keep it to as close to 120 as you can, even though it's a bit tricky. If you want to look in a little bit more detail about how to tackle that summary question, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel because you can watch this YouTube lesson. So search for that on YouTube, and it's about, 18 minutes long, and it will take you through a different question, a different text, not the one that we've been looking at just now. But again, she'll give you some tips on how to deal with it step by step in a little bit more detail than I have there. So that will be useful practice for you to go through that as well at some point, either now or in the run up to your exam. This is the final text then, text C. Remember, all 3 texts will be linked in some way. They'll be about the same kind of theme or topic. And normally they'll be a bit different. So one of them might be some very factual information. One of them could be autobiographical. One of them could be a newspaper article. There'll be different types of text, but about the same kind of topic. Here we've got, in a blog post, a writer looking back on their husband's preparations to compete in an Ironman event. I'll leave you here to read text C, so you might want to pause this now to make sure that you've read text C. And this is the second half of text C, so again, just pause it and make sure that you've finished reading text C. And then you can see now what the first few questions will be in the final section of the paper. So again, you've got some short questions just worth 1 mark here, and they're quite straightforward. It will just underline some words or phrases, and it will ask you to identify a word or phrase from the text which suggests the same idea as the words underlined. So here, for instance, it says, the writer was slightly unsure that it was a good idea to publish their blog entry. You've got to find a word or a phrase from the text which means slightly unsure. And then the next one, can you see it says, her husband's training had little effect on the daily life of the family to begin with. You need a word or phrase from the text which means had little effect. Okay, so again, pause it, have a go at this, look back at the text, obviously, to find those words or phrases and see how well you do on those questions. And again, we've got another couple of questions here, not worth a huge number of marks again, but remember every mark's going to count. So you want to try and get these 1 or 2 mark or 3 mark questions correct if you can. The next one says using your own words, take that seriously. It says explain what the writer means by each of the words underlined. And you've got like a little passage here. It says June was all about Iron Man. Endless weekends with Sam gone until 5 p.m. each day. We just want another way of making sure that you've understood what does it mean by endless, and then technically, and then desperate within the context of that passage. And then the next question says use one example from the text below to explain how the writer suggests their feelings about Sam's approach to training for the Ironman event. Okay, you've got to pick out one example from the text and use your own words to explain, okay, what that suggests about their feelings about Sam's approach to training for the Ironman. This is the second now, this question D, this is the second longer question. You can see now, remember a lot of the marks in this paper are worth 1, 2, 3 marks. Here's another 15 marker, okay? You've got to take this one really seriously. And if you're used to doing the Edexcel IGCSE, think the kind of language analysis that you have to do for question 4 when you're analysing the non-fiction text. A lot of the questions in this paper have been what questions so far, haven't they? Just testing your understanding, picking things out. Here is where they're asking you to analyse language. Okay, so this is where you've got to go to town on picking out words and phrases. What does that word suggest? What does it make me think of? In particular, see if you can find similes and metaphors and interesting word choices. Pick out a particular adjective or a particular verb. Okay, but Cambridge are really big on you picking out examples of imagery. So there's something to do with maybe some similes, a metaphor, some personification. If there's some visual imagery or sensory description, anything to do with what you could see, smell, hear, taste, or touch, any of those kind of images, they really want you to pick out those words and say, why has the writer used that word? What are they trying to suggest? What effect are they trying to create? What are they trying to make you think of? And maybe how does one image or word link to another one? Overall, what kind of impression are they trying to give here? Okay, and they've asked you to look at these 2 paragraphs here, paragraphs 10 and 12. So go back and look at those paragraphs, okay, and it says choose 3 examples of words or phrases from each paragraph, so 3 from each, to support your answer. Okay, and you're looking at how the writer uses language to convey meaning and create effect in these paragraphs. So go back to those paragraphs, paragraphs 10 and 12, okay, and look to see, right, I'm going to find 3, the best 3 examples of words or phrases here that I can really explain and analyse. And this is where you're doing a kind of petal kind of structure to your response. These are analytical paragraphs that you're being asked for here. And if you can do this really well, you should be able to get close to 15 marks for this question. It says write about 200 to 300 words. I wouldn't worry too much about the word limit there. If you need to go over, just, it's the detail, it's the analysis that's going to be really important. This is the mark scheme. So if you look at, this was from paragraph 10, these are some of the examples that you could have picked out when you were discussing the use of language in paragraph 10. And then here are some of the examples in paragraph 12 that you could have picked out and spoken about and explored. So that will give you some idea of the kind of points that are in the mark scheme that they would want you to be exploring and analysing and picking out and making points about. This is the final question, and you can see that this is worth the most marks. This is worth 25 marks overall, and this is based on text C. So you've got to read text C first, okay, and they're asking you to respond by writing a text yourself. Now here they're saying, right, imagine you're Sam, and after completing the race, you're interviewed for a podcast about your experience and the advice you would offer to anyone thinking of entering an Ironman. And it says the interviewer asks you 3 questions only. How exactly do you need to prepare for a challenge like Ironman, and why is each aspect of that preparation important? How do you think preparing for Ironman affected other areas of your life, and what advice would you offer anyone considering entering an Ironman for the first time? And what were the rewards of completing an Ironman for you and your family? Now, it might not be an interview that they're asking you to do here. Sometimes they ask you to write a letter, or a diary entry, or a speech, or an article. Normally, they're asking you to imagine you are one of the characters in the text. Okay. The key thing is what they want you to do is to pick out examples and points and detail and ideas. Okay, so you need to be looking at text C with a highlighter in your hand, or a pen or a pencil, and you need to be highlighting or underlining all the things that you think are relevant. It's another example of where you just need to be really, really, really thorough. Okay. And what you've got to make sure that you do is you look at each of the 3 bullet points. Okay, so you can see here, you've got the 3 bullet points there. If you only deal with one of them or 2 of them, no matter how much detail you go into and how good your answer is, you are limiting the number of points that you get, the number of marks that you get. Okay, they definitely want to see you dealing with each of those 3 things in a reasonably balanced way. Okay, so you could almost think of your interview as having, in this case, of having 3 sections. Think of it as right, I'm going to deal with this first bullet point, then the second one, then the third one. You could have 3 different color highlighters. That will be a way of doing it, so that you have the first bullet point in mind and you highlight everything blue. And then the second one, you do everything green. The third one, do everything yellow. Okay, or you could just number them. Okay, it's up to you. But they definitely want to see that you cover each of those 3 bullet points, or you will be losing marks. Writing about 250 to 350 words doesn't matter if you go a little bit over, okay? But those 15 marks you can see at the bottom for the content of your answer, you will get them if you are just really, really thorough. It does say, I don't know if you noticed this, but it does say use your own words. What you can't do is just lift whole words and phrases. Obviously, again, there are key words you're going to be using, like running and Ironman and whatever, okay? But they don't want you to just lift a whole sentence, okay? Just copy or quote a whole sentence. They don't want that. It's got to be you reading it, understanding it, and then having a go at expressing it in your own way. Of course, you use some of the same words or phrases or whatever, okay? But they don't want to see you just copying things from the text. They want to see that you've read it, you've understood it, and you're able to express it. Okay? This is the mark scheme for this question. Okay, so you can see for each of those bullet points, the kinds of points that you could have made there. Okay? And then finally, the other thing that you could do is, if you look at Miss Duckworth's classroom, again on her YouTube channel, there's another go at one of those final questions. Again, it's on a different text, but it's all there, and it'd be definitely worth you having a look at in the run up to the exam, so that you're really familiar with how to tackle this final question. The key thing I want to say to you with this exam is that if you are just unbelievably thorough, you can do really well in this exam. There's nothing to revise beforehand, because each of the 3 is unseen texts, but you've got to take on board what I'm saying about how to tackle each question. Okay, and so going through this PowerPoint, this video that I've just given you here, and maybe looking at some of the ones on Miss Duckworth's classroom as well, okay, which goes through different questions within the paper, And practicing that and just getting your head around how to tackle each question will mean that when you get in there, you'll feel confident thinking, it's the summary question. It's the language analysis one. This is the one where I need to write and use lots of points, but cover each of the 3 bullet points. Okay. So I think you should do really well in this paper. Some final tips then: read the texts and questions carefully. When it says own words, you've got to use your own words. Spend longest on the questions worth the most marks. Be thorough. Keep looking for points and detail and ideas, and make sure you answer each bullet point. Okay, look for any of the questions. If it gives you bullet points, you must answer them. Otherwise, you're going to lose marks.